Home Secretary, distinguished guests, colleagues, good afternoon. I feel incredibly humble standing before you today. I'm just the last from Lancashire, from a single parent family on a council estate in Rochdale, who's standing here as the President of the association that represents the senior operational leaders in the police service in England and Wales. But I'm also very proud. And the pride I feel is the same pride that I felt 28 years ago to this very day, when for the very first time I put on a police uniform. And like many people here in the room will have done, I looked in the mirror, got over the initial shock of seeing myself in uniform, and then I knew at that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of duty, and I knew that I'd chosen the right vocation. I knew I'd made the right decision. I had a duty to serve the public. And that strong sense of duty is still with me today. And that sense of duty and pride is what drives me, and I'm sure many of you, on a day-to-day basis, to do our very best to serve the public. And I'm sure that it motivates the 100,000 officers that are out there, day in and day out, doing their job for the public, and at times putting their lives on the line. But why wouldn't I be proud to stand here representing an association that is held in such high regard, not just within the service, but also by our key stakeholders? We have a strong reputation for saying it as it is. We are known to be pragmatic, but professional and constructive. We have members like yourselves, totally committed to their job of delivering the best possible policing service to the public. I'm really honoured to have been elected as your president this year. And I'm going to talk to you today about a number of things. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that are facing the service at the present time, particularly around finance and the impact that's having not just on the service, but on the public as well. And I'm going to talk about some of the reforms that are being proposed and my concerns about their impact. Again, not just on our members, not just on the wider service, but on public trust and confidence. And finally, I'm going to talk about leadership and integrity, and we heard about that this morning. And I'm going to talk about that in the context of how we can actually move forward so that the service comes through what is a really difficult time much stronger than we are at the present time. But before I do that, I want to offer a warm welcome to the Home Secretary, the Right Honourable Theresa May. I'm delighted that you've been able to take some time out of your really busy diary to share some time with us today. I'm not sure if you're aware, but you're actually now an association record holder, because as a Home Secretary, the only one that's ever been with us for 4 consecutive years. In fact, that's probably better than most of the people here in the room. So can I congratulate you on your achievement, and again, a really warm welcome. This government came into power 3.5 years ago, and they clearly had a plan to reform the police service. That plan has actually brought us into quite a lot of conflict with the government over those 3.5 years, at all levels of the service. And that conflict has been a really difficult time for all the staff associations. But I'd like to think that we've actually managed to retain a professional working relationship, not just with the Home Secretary, but with the Minister and with officials in the Home Office. Because despite difficult times, I actually think that positive working relationship is really important if we're going to move the service forward. There have been a number of things that we've actually agreed on. Mental health and the importance of policing and mental health and the role of the health service is something that the Home Secretary and I have had a number of conversations about. Many of you will know that I've advocated for some time that it's time to stop using police cells for people who are detained under Section 136 of the Mental Health Act. It is just not an appropriate place for people to be. I'm also advocating for a power for police officers to detain people who are self-harming in a private place, where police officers at the moment find it really difficult to work out how on earth they can actually help somebody. And I'm also campaigning for some better training in the use of restraints for police officers. Police officers are currently trained to restrain criminals who are violent and angry. People with mental health problems aren't like that. They're violent for a different reason, and it's really important that our staff are trained to restrain people in the right way that's going to cause the least harm. We also agree on the unhelpful performance culture that's been developed over the years in terms of policing and all the bureaucracy that surrounds that, the use of targets and the unintended consequences, and the audit and compliance culture that's been generated around the whole performance management. I think we both agree that performance management is essential in any organisation, but it's how performance is managed that is really important. But of course, there are many things that we do disagree on, and we've told you so. We let you know when we think that one of the proposals for reform are not suitable, are not appropriate. And we will continue to do so. One of our objectives is about influencing national policy and strategy. That will remain an objective of ours because it's something that we can achieve. But there have been times, Home Secretary, when we felt that we haven't been listened to. That can become incredibly frustrating for the senior operational leaders whose professional judgment is often based on 25, 30 years of experience. But we do understand that you have a mandate and you have a responsibility and a right to go ahead with reform where you've got a legal requirement to do so. And at times like that, we understand what our position is. As an example, police and crime commissioners. We didn't agree with the principle of one person having all the vested interest installed in them. We didn't agree that one person could necessarily represent a community of 2 million people. However, when the legislation was passed, we understood that actually the new governance arrangements, it was really important that they worked effectively for the sake of the public. So our job then is to try and make it work as best we can. And I'm guessing that we'll have a similar position with direct entry. Home Secretary is fully aware of our position. We've had numerous conversations about it. The reality is the Home Secretary has made a decision that direct entry to superintendent ranks will go ahead. We now have a responsibility for the people that are going to become superintendents to make sure that the recruitment, selection and training of those individuals is the best possible that we can achieve. So we will work with the College of Policing to make sure that we minimise the operational risks that we foresee in relation to direct entry. So moving on then to the first major challenge that I think the service is facing. And that relates to the financial position that the service is in. The cuts to the central grant, and in places in particular where the council tax has been frozen, has meant that forces are facing some real difficult financial challenges, some more than others. And as we heard from the HMIC report recently, there are a number of forces that are going to find it particularly difficult over the next 18 months of this current spending review period. And of course, the impact of those cuts has meant that police numbers have fallen significantly. We've never really got hung up on police numbers. For us, it's about making sure that there are sufficient people out there that are properly trained to do the job that's required of the service. I'm not sure anybody really knows what the right number for that is. But the reality is that over 14,000 police officers, we've got 14,000 fewer police officers now than we had in April 2010. And that has to make a difference. We've got 400 fewer superintending ranks than we had back in 2010. And we know that that really does make a difference to you. For all the people that are left behind, your jobs have got bigger. Your workloads have increased. Your spans of control have increased. And we know from our resilience survey what an impact that has on people like you and our members. The impact of working long hours, more on-call responsibility, finding it more and more difficult to get time off. And we've had conversations about this. We've presented it to Chief of Constables Council, and we're now looking at things like sickness figures to see that actually there are a number of members that are now going off sick with stress-related illness. And that concerns us. And we will keep working with chief officers to make sure that they understand how vital it is that they look after their staff. Not just you, but also the federated ranks. And we've got a responsibility as superintending ranks to look after the federated ranks and the police staff that work for you in the same vein. Everybody is working so much harder. I question how sustainable it is for people like you to continue at the pace that you're working at. And I do fear for the health of some of our members. We will be repeating our resilience survey in next summer, and we hope that you all contribute to that to give us a really good picture of how things are looking for you in your workplace. And I talked about spans of control increasing and areas of responsibility increasing. We're now in a position where in 10 forces in the country, we have members who are commanding areas with more police officers than the 2 smallest forces in the country. In one force, there's a BCU being developed that will come into force next April that will have over 1,300 officers. That BCU, commanded by one superintendent, will be bigger than 11 forces in this country. How can that be right? How can it be an efficient way of running the business when you have a chief superintendent commanding that many people and at the same time forces with a full command structure, a police and crime commissioner and their office? Now, I know that life's not as simplistic as that and policing's far more complex, but I do think that the time is right for us to have a review, a national review of policing structures, to actually look at how we can make some savings in a different way to potentially impacting on visible policing for the public. Not to look at policing structures, for me, is actually effectively putting handcuffs on the service and asking them to find more savings. And I think it'll be a missed opportunity to look at doing things differently. There's a saying in the service that all you get for less is less. I don't actually totally agree with that. I think the service has actually demonstrated that you can make efficiency savings. I think you would all agree that your own forces are far more efficient now than they were 3 years ago. But I do think that the service is starting to creak. I think we're starting to get to full stretch. And I'm concerned that the areas for future efficiencies are getting less and less. The low-hanging fruit, that they call it, has been picked. Collaboration, technology, outsourcing are all offered as alternative ways of finding money rather than reducing headcount. I'm just not convinced that that money is out there to be had. So I have some real concerns for the longer-term position of some forces. And one of the biggest concerns for me is around neighbourhood policing. I know that already there are some forces that have neighbourhood policing teams that are staffed pretty much by PCSOs and no longer have police officers in them. Now, in my 28 years service, I've seen neighbourhood policing come and go, and I've seen it come back again. Because things go full circle in policing, don't they? We all know that. But actually, when it came back this last time, neighbourhood policing did come back far better and far stronger. The model that we've got now, where local officers not only engage with local people and deliver on local priorities, but actually contribute to that regional and national and international intelligence picture, I think is far different from where we were 28 years ago when I joined. We have a really effective policing model for neighbourhood policing. It's valued by the public. They think it works. My concern is that as we move into the next CSR, the 2015-16 CSR, forces are going to find it incredibly difficult to try and keep neighbourhood policing, the neighbourhood policing model that we have. If you look at the priorities and the difficult decisions that chief officers have to make, we heard this morning about cybercrime. We've really not opened that box yet. That's a priority. We've got child sexual exploitation, domestic abuse, roads policing, emergency response, serious and organised crime. Something's got to give somewhere, and my fear is that neighbourhood policing will become a nice-to-have model rather than a core function and the bedrock of how we police across England and Wales. I'm not scaremongering by saying this. I'm just trying to portray the reality out there. This is a genuine concern that has been raised by you, our members, at the last round of district meetings. It was the one message that kept coming through to us all the time. So I know that it's a genuine concern of yours. And it takes me back to the question I asked earlier, the fundamental question about the structures of policing. Do we continue with a 43-force, outdated, inefficient policing model in this country and risk losing what is the cornerstone of policing in our neighbourhood policing model? That's a question to be answered. So I'll move on now to an issue that does cause me some concern, and that's one of Tom Windsor's recommendations from his first review that is currently going to be heard at the Police Arbitration Tribunal. And that's compulsory severance for police officers. It's a really thorny issue. For me, it's a game changer for policing. It will totally change the relationship that officers have with their chief officers. People ask, why should the police be treated any different from the rest of the country in terms of being made redundant? My answer to that is because we are different. We swear an oath to the monarch. That gives us the status of the office of constable. We're provided with coercive powers to detain somebody, to remove their liberty, to use force on people. Very, very important powers. But those powers are given to us on a condition that we act independently and without fear or favour. We should be totally protected from any undue influence. When a police officer is out on the street making that decision, that is their decision. They are accountable for that decision. That is very different from the rest of the public sector. We also have restrictions on officers' private lives. We know what those restrictions are. They can make life a little difficult for us, but we accept them. We accept them because it's part of the role. But those restrictions aren't the same restrictions that other people have. We don't have a right to strike. We are different from other people, and that's why I believe we should be treated differently. My biggest fear, and it may be a worst case scenario, but my biggest fear is that you have a police officer who is making a decision in relation to an operational incident, but is in a position where redundancy or compulsory severance is being considered in their area. Do they make what they feel is the right decision as a police officer, independently, without undue influence? Or do they think, I know that the chief would actually want me to do something differently. I know that the PCC has been talking about X, Y, and Z. Does that influence an officer's decision? Whether the chief or the PCC will actually have any influence over that redundancy decision is irrelevant. As far as the police officer is concerned, their perception is the reality. And if it makes them think differently, that can't be a good thing. It can't be a good thing for us, and it can't be a good thing for the public. We rely on the public's trust and confidence to get our legitimacy to police by consent. And if the public's trust and confidence is eroded by virtue of the fact that police officers, they fear police officers might act with influence, then we've lost it. I just don't think it's worth it. I ask whether it's necessary. Voluntary exit scheme has been in since January this year. One force has used the voluntary exit scheme out of 43. Forces are still managing to reduce their numbers, predominantly through natural wastage. So do we really need to totally change that relationship between officers and their chief officers, when at the end of the day, it might not actually be necessary? If you look at Scotland, and look what Scotland have achieved, they've reduced their figures considerably in terms of officers when they've created their national force. They didn't use voluntary exit scheme, they didn't use compulsory severance. They managed to achieve it through natural wastage and workforce management. I would challenge chiefs in England and Wales to do the same. The second issue that concerns me around the impact on our members in particular is a recent proposal to change the police disciplinary process. The proposal contains a number of suggestions, one of which is to remove the right to legal advice at a gross misconduct hearing or a third stage unsatisfactory performance procedure. This is a huge issue. If somebody's in a position where they might lose their job, removing their right to legal advice for us is a real threat. We're really concerned about the impact this might have on individuals. And it comes at a time when The professional body for policing, the College of Policing, has been introduced to try and move policing onto the same level as other professions, such as the legal profession, the medical profession, to make us more professional. And yet you look at other professional bodies and they all have legal representation when people are in a situation where they might lose their job. So we've put a very strong case together in our response where we've proposed some alternatives that we think might actually be a way to deal with the concerns that have raised the reform proposals, but actually we'll do it in a way that actually will protect you, our members. On that occasion, we do hope that the government listens to us. And I want to move on to the leadership and integrity argument. We heard this morning from Matt and from Lynn about the challenges that face the service, about the negative media that we've heard, some of it recent, some of it more historical, but nevertheless it's all there. And once it's out in the media, in the public domain, it impacts on the public's trust and confidence in the police service. We need to find a way of moving forward that actually will take the service through this in a way that we can rebuild that trust and confidence and try and get on the front foot. There's been an integrity programme introduced earlier this year following a statement from the Home Secretary in the House that actually contains a number of issues that will help. Talks about developing a code of ethics, and we're working closely with the College of Policing to try and develop a code of ethics that will be really meaningful and will make a difference to police officers. There's a register, a central national register for gifts and hospitality in relation to chief officers, and likewise in relation to business interests. And these things are all very good and all very helpful. But actually, you and I both know that without a change in the environment in which we are working, to an extent that challenge is actively encouraged rather than defended, then we're not actually going to make any progress. You can introduce all the policies in the world, it will not make a difference if you, the senior operational leaders in policing, do not feel that you can actually challenge chief officers, or anybody else for that matter, in relation to matters of ethics and integrity. That environment has got to get better. And Lynn alluded to that this morning. She knows that what she's trying to do in her force is different from what you might have experienced in your force. But it's easy for us to lay the problem at the door of chief officers, because what we do know from speaking to our federated colleagues is that actually some of our members are part of that problem. Some of our members are very defensive to feedback, don't want to hear the wrong thing. And so we've got a responsibility to make sure that we do our job to change it. We can look at chief officers and we can say, well, nothing's changing, and we can just complain about it. Or we can do something about it. And we as the senior operational leaders can be the catalyst for change. We can take Lynn's advice and say, well, actually, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to do it right. It doesn't matter what happens above us, we're going to do it right. And if we can get that critical mass that starts to change the environment for those that work for us, then I would hope that that will start to change the shape of the service in terms of that culture. Excuse me. I just want to finish off by saying we all know there are fewer of you. There are fewer of you out there, and there is much, much more demanded of you every day. But I know that you continue to deliver and make a difference. We all have that sense of pride, that sense of duty, and we need to hold on to that. We need to make sure that that's what actually drives us every single day. I think you all know, and I know, things aren't going to get easier over the next couple of years. We've got at least 18 months of the current CSR period, we've got 2050-16, and there's probably more beyond that. But we have to accept the privilege and the responsibility of command. We've got a responsibility for working closely with chief officers to deliver change. Change that'll show some really clear leadership to the people who work for you. That'll deliver some ambition and some hope. If we're not going to do that, who's going to do it? So I want to finish with just a few pleas to a few people. First of all, to the government. My plea to the government is please listen to us. We are not averse to change. We do want to work together. We want to improve policing just in the same way you want to improve policing. Just because we raise concerns doesn't mean that we're scaremongering. It means we're concerned. A plea to chief officers. Value your workforce. Value the people that are left. Invest in them. Make sure you understand their needs. Listen to them. And help us to create an environment in the service where people can challenge without fear, which will actually make the service far stronger and far better. My plea to you as our members, the senior operational leaders of the service, you can and do make a difference every day. We need to show that strong leadership, not just to the people who work for us, not just to our communities, but to chief officers. We need to let them know that we are going to make a difference. And to the wider service, I would say that yes, things are really difficult. Yes, you're feeling undervalued. I understand that. But we all need to remember why we joined this service. We joined out of a sense of public duty, a desire to serve and protect. We need to keep that at our heart. Thank you very much.
Irene, thank you very much indeed. A reminder that we do hope to have time for questions at the end of this session. Right now, would you welcome to the stage to respond to all that, the Home Secretary.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be with you today. I'm always pleased to be able to speak with and to police officers, but I'm particularly glad to be talking to you today, and that's not because it's my fourth appearance before the Superintendents Association, and it's not just because I've always valued the constructive dialogue and discussions that we've always had, and we have always had that ability to talk openly with each other, and long may that continue. But the main reason that I'm pleased to be here today is that you are tomorrow's Chief Constables. You are the future leaders of the police in England and Wales. And that's why today I want to talk to you about police leadership and police culture. But let me start by reiterating one critically important fact. On the best measures we have, crime is down to its lowest level since we started keeping detailed criminal official records. More effective policing is not the only explanation for why crime is falling, but it is a fundamental part of the process. And you are doing a very impressive job in what I know are extremely exacting circumstances. But in that context, I would just like to address one of the remarks that, Irene, you made on frontline policing and the effect of what is happening in relation to budgets on frontline policing and the concern that that is being cut to dangerously low levels. I don't think the facts support that view. The proportion of officers on the front line has increased from 89% in March 2010 to 91% in March 2013. Forces are focusing reductions on those areas where the workforce consists of people who are not on the front line. Unwarranted officers have been freed up to be where the public expects to see them, fighting crime on the streets. And as I've said, crime continues to fall. And yes, we have reformed the police radically over the past 3 years, and you have been central to those reforms. The first thing we did was to scrap targets. No more action plans, no more attempts by me to second-guess your operational decisions. I've given up the old Home Office practice of issuing centralised, top-down diktats. I'm not going to try to micromanage what you do. You have only one target now, to reduce crime. The second thing we did was to replace local government police authorities with directly elected police and crime commissioners. The public, in combination with PCCs and you, now set local police priorities, monitor police performance, and hold officers to account for what they do. Crime maps, updated regularly and available for the public to consult on the internet whenever they choose, identify not only what crimes have happened in each area, but what the police have done about them. Every ward now has to hold regular beat meetings where members of the public can quiz officers on what they've done about the crimes in their neighbourhood. To an unprecedented extent, ordinary people are now in charge, and you need to respond to them and their concerns. And the public does demand more of police officers than ever before. Our reforms reflect that reality. It's why I've reformed Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary to make it more independent. People will no longer accept police officers investigating themselves and apparently routinely endorsing their colleagues in the old way. And that's one reason why Tom Windsor was appointed to head HMIC. That's also why I've reformed the Independent Police Complaints Commission, so that it lives up to its name in a way the public can understand and cannot be perceived as just another way that the police are able to investigate themselves. Now, as police leaders, you are expected to have extremely high standards of integrity. Your responsibility to be truthful, ethical, and effective as leaders, police officers, and as human beings underlies all of what you do. You cannot hope to retain the confidence of the public unless you are, and are recognised as being honest and effective crime fighters. Increasing transparency and accountability, therefore, are critical to my reforms. Now, I don't have to tell you how important it is that public confidence in the police is maintained. And it simply can't be maintained if people think that senior police officers are lacking in integrity or behaving in a self-serving way, or if on the street your constables are being rude or disrespectful to the public. For instance, stop and search is an invaluable tool for reducing street crime, particularly knife crime. I want you to use it because if it is used properly and fairly, it works very effectively. But the caveat is vital: if it is used properly and fairly. Stop and search has the potential to cause immense hostility and resentment of the police, with all the implications that has for generating distrust and ending cooperation from the public, if it is not used properly and fairly. Now, as superintendents, you have responsibility for making sure that stop and search is implemented fairly by the officers under your command. And that's why your leadership role is so important. Stop and search can either be an effective policy for stopping street crime, or it can be a means of generating distrust of the police. And you can determine which it is. Our reforms are also about making sure that crimes that have been neglected are effectively tackled. Organised crime is an increasing menace. Its violence threatens our communities, and it corrupts everything it touches, including local government and professions such as accounting and the law. The more we discover about it, the more evidence we get that suggests its scale is larger than we thought and that it is not being tackled effectively. The new National Crime Agency, which launches next month, will lead the UK's fight to cut serious and organised crime. It can only do that, however, in close partnership with you and many others. The NCA will have the single national intelligence picture for serious and organised crime. It will have cutting-edge operational capabilities and the mandate to coordinate the work of other agencies. But the success of the NCA will depend on its relationship with police forces. Your knowledge of the communities in which you work is unparalleled, and your operational expertise is a critical part of the response to organised crime. That's why I've provided an extra £10 million of funding to support your regional organised crime units this year, making sure that the connection between national, regional and local organisations is as strong as possible. And the new Serious and Organised Crime Strategy, which I will publish next month, will support you in your efforts to cut crime in a way that works for the communities you protect. Our reforms mean that more is demanded of you, but those reforms also help you to discharge the wider leadership role I want you to take up. The College of Policing is going to help establish professional standards. The college's What Works Centre for Crime Reduction is going to evaluate exactly which of all the policies that have been tried are the ones that work most effectively to reduce which crimes. The evidence that comes out of that evaluation will help you determine your priorities. We are reforming the pay system so that you can reward officers who acquire extra skills. Increases in pay will no longer automatically follow the length of time an officer has spent working for the police. You're going to have fitter, more motivated officers serving under you. We've cut out useless bureaucracy that turned police officers into form fillers rather than crime fighters. And we've given you the freedom to make your own decisions and to follow your own crime-fighting policies. And it's essential that you pass this down the chain of command. You need to trust your junior officers to use their own judgment, just as I trust you. Having freedom means taking responsibility. It's down to you to decide what crime-fighting policies you're going to follow. And yet I have noticed that targets have been making a comeback in many forces. They're certainly not coming from me, and I don't think they're being used to increase the effectiveness of policing. Their main function seems to be to act as a security blanket for senior officers, a way to avoid taking responsibility for decisions they have to make. Now, I'm not saying that most or even many of you have responded in that way, but some have, and none of you should. It's essential that you have the confidence in yourselves that I have in you, the confidence to take responsibility for your own decisions, and not to try to hide behind an old process or procedure which enables you to evade responsibility. Your leadership and supervision is critical if our reforms are to work, especially now we've got rid of mechanical processes for assessing performance, and you can no longer simply tick boxes in order to prove that you're doing the right thing. We're entering a third stage of police reform, where the main driver of change won't be me, it will be you. My role is to remove the obstacles that are blocking the creation of a more effective police force on a national scale. There is at least one particular matter that I know you all want to see fixed, and that's the extent to which police officers have to spend time dealing with people who have not committed a crime but have mental health problems. Irene Curtis outlined the problem in her speech just now. In around 1/3 of all the cases where a mentally ill individual has been detained for their own safety, the place of safety was not a hospital but a police cell. And police officers spent up to 1/5 of their hours on duty dealing with people who are mentally ill. Across the nation, that represents a huge slice of police time that is taken away from catching criminals and fighting crime, and instead spent doing something that police officers are neither properly equipped nor qualified to do. And I'm as concerned as you are about this. I know the police will still respond in an emergency where there is real concern for the safety of an individual or the public. But mentally ill people should obviously be cared for by the health service, not by police officers. But that's not something that I can sort out on my own, and it needs a policy solution involving the Department of Health and the NHS. And I've actively engaged the Secretary of State for Health on this issue, and I can tell you that steps are being taken to ensure that the need for mental health services is met by health authorities and not by the police. Jeremy Hunt has agreed to test the policy of having mental health professionals out on the beat with police officers, so they're in a position to take the decisions currently being made by officers, and they can take control of the matter. I know there are already some good triage schemes in place, and the additional trials that the Health Secretary is funding are going to start in 9 police forces shortly. The work being done at a national level by the Home Office and the NHS needs you to translate it to a local level. The challenge for you is to provide the evidence for better local mental health provision in your area and to work with health and wellbeing boards and NHS commissioners to help you to get it. There's also progress being made on what I know can be the bane of every officer's life, IT. IT is central to efficient policing, and we're going to end the situation where a police officer either carries an out-of-date device that cannot link him to essential databases or none at all. It's soon going to be possible to connect a range of the most popular mobile devices to national policing systems without compromising security. This will mean that officers will be able to use, for instance, an iPhone to get onto the PNC to check criminal and other records, which will increase their efficiency very considerably. We're setting up the police ICT company, which will be owned and led by PCCs. It will allow police forces to have easy and quick access to IT support so as to provide innovative solutions to IT problems and better quality contract management. It will be able to consolidate existing contracts and services and act as a collective purchaser so individual forces can take advantage of economies of scale. And we will further support forces by ensuring national systems link up and talk to each other. But I also expect you to increase efficiency yourselves by collaborating with the private sector, by constantly searching out new and innovative ways to get better value for money. I will be establishing a new police innovation fund worth £50 million a year from 2014. That should help you with the costs of implementing the new and innovative methods of policing that I know you're all itching to try out. And although saving money and driving forward efficiency is centrally important to our reforms, at their heart lies a simple single principle, that you should be able to be the independent crime fighters that you want to be, leading your officers from the front in the war on crime. We are going through a period of change with police leadership. PCCs have overseen the arrival of some chief constables and the departure of others. What I want and what the police need is a future generation of police chiefs who are innovators and above all no-nonsense crime fighters. Crime fighters who listen to the public but who also lead the way in implementing effective ways of cutting crime. I know I'm asking a great deal of you, but you have demonstrated your capacity to deliver. You have cut crime with fewer officers and lower budgets. You are doing more with less. That makes you the model public service in the era of budget cuts. Your goals are now to cut crime further and to increase the public satisfaction with the police. As long as it's legal and ethical, how you achieve those goals is up to you. So if you ask me what's the most significant thing that government has done for you, I would answer we've given you back the power to use your own judgment. That is the key to successful policing. It's the key to all of our reforms. It is you who will make those reforms produce the results they're intended to: fewer crimes and more criminals punished. I have placed my trust in you, and I have no doubt that you will repay it. Thank you.
Just one question from me. You've stated publicly in the past and you reiterated today your belief that crime is falling. But this morning at this conference, we heard from the National Lead on Cybercrime, that's the Deputy Chief Constable of East Midlands, who said that in his view, crime isn't falling, crime is changing. And he had a number of facts to back this up, one being that 1 in 5 people have become the victims of offline crime, what I would call conventional crime. 1 in 3 people have been the victims of cybercrime. And a lot of this crime, the bulk of it, doesn't get reported. So what he essentially was saying is, your crime figures are misleading. What's your response?
Well, first of all, I think when we talk about cybercrime, it's very easy to think that all cybercrime is somehow something completely new that has suddenly come to hit us. Of course, quite a lot of cybercrime is what I would call traditional crime, but just using a different method in order to undertake that particular form of crime. But it is right that we need to focus on the issue of cybercrime, and that's why within the National Crime Agency we are setting up the new National Cybercrime Unit. It's bringing together some e-crime capacity that already exists, for example, within the Met. It will be the single source, national source of intelligence in relation to cybercrime, and it will significantly help the ability to be able to deal with cybercrime, whether it is what one might call a new form of crime or traditional crimes, but simply being conducted through a different method and a different methodology.
I understand, obviously, you can't include in your figures crimes that haven't been reported, crimes that haven't been investigated, which, as he was saying, is the bulk of cybercrime. But I put to you again my point that it's slightly misleading, is it not, to say crime is falling when you don't even discuss or contemplate cybercrime?
Well, first of all, one of my responses to you, John, on that is that actually we have been making some changes to the crime figures. I mean, for example, the most recent crime figures, we've actually been looking at the figures produced by Action Fraud and finding ways of incorporating those in the crime figures that are being reported. One of the first things I did, one very early things I did when I came into this job, was actually sit down with the chief statistician and say to her that I wanted her to look into the whole issue of crime figures and how they were recorded and what we were showing. Because I think it's important that the public are able to have some confidence in what they see and what they, in terms of the figures that are recorded. Now, I say crime is falling. Yes, those are the figures, what the figures show, and if you're going to look at a trend, you look at figures that are comparative over that period of time, and they show that crime is falling. But as I say, we have been making some changes, as we have done in relation to the Action Fraud figures.
And would you concede, final point for me, would you concede that the way things stand at the moment, the overwhelming majority of police officers, including people in this room, are ill-equipped to deal with this? In other words, if I reported a cyber attack, I went to my local police station, I would like to bet you the police officer there, and I think it's generally accepted here, wouldn't know what to do.
Well, I think this is, if we just look at some of the types of crime within cybercrime, yes, of course, if you're looking at something which requires a very particular type of IT expertise, and some forces have officers who are, as I said, I've visited one regional organised crime unit and met officers actually sitting in a room with banks of machines around them, using their particular skill in relation to IT. But I think there are areas where we do need to enhance ability to deal with things, hence putting a focus on this in the National Crime Agency, but also fraud generally, actually. This is something that certainly I get, businesses will say to me that perhaps they don't feel that fraud is something that we as a country have given sufficient focus to in the past. The new Economic Crime Command in the NCA will enhance our ability to deal with fraud and other sorts of economic crime. So yes, we are boosting the ability to deal with it, but I recognise these issues won't just be for the NCA. There will be a need, obviously, for officers in forces to be able to recognise and deal with these as well.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, could I ask all our questions to stand, please? It enables us to get better coverage for the conference tape. Yes, sir. Tell us who you are and what your question is.
Thank you very much. Mark Payne from the West Midlands. It's a question for the Home Secretary, really just expanding on the last question. I'm the lead for violent crime in the West Midlands. And I'm doing a lot of work with accident and emergency departments. And what is really clear is that we have lots more people in accident and emergency departments who have been victims of violent crime than actually come and report to us. The same is also true of domestic violence victims, where it's really important that we get hold of people and get crimes reported to us, and it's the right thing to do to record those crimes.
Could you just help me out on that? Why is it not reported to you? Are the people reluctant to make a
are
case of it, or the hospital holding back information? What's happening?
Yeah, there are a number of different reasons, some of which relate to the way A&E record data, some of which is confidence in policing, some of which is a lot of this is domestic violence where people don't want to report it to us because they're fearful of the repercussions. So sure. There are a whole host of reasons. I suppose the question is, all of the things, and cybercrime that I've just discussed, will drive reported crime up at a time when you say that what your objective for us to do is to actually reduce crime, and that's our only objective. I just wonder if that's the right objective, actually, because it's really important we get hold of the people who are committing these crimes, but to do that, we do need to record the crimes in the first place.
Home Secretary?
Yes, if I can, this maybe a slightly lengthy answer, but just take several bits of what you can and come to the main point at the end, if I may. On A&E departments, one of the commitments that we have as a coalition government, it's in our coalition agreement, is to get the NHS, A&E departments to share information with police, particularly about knife, victims of knife incidents. so that we can start to identify hotspots in relation to what potentially could be these sorts of crimes. It's been very difficult to get the NHS to share information. We are making some progress. I wrote out to police and crime commissioners a few months ago in relation to this, and chief constables. One of the health ministers has written to health trusts, hospital trusts about this. I think we're making some progress where we can show, and this is something that can be done at local level too, show to your local hospital that actually sharing this information enables the police to do something about it and potentially reduces the number of people A&E departments are having turning up with these injuries in the first place. So it's not just something that benefits the police, it benefits the hospital and it benefits the wider public too. So getting that information and getting an understanding of what's really happening is something that we are working on. But as I say, there is something that can be done locally. Domestic violence, it is difficult to get. We all know the figure is, I think, that a woman on average, because obviously the majority of domestic violence victims are women, not always the case. Obviously we recognise some men are victims of domestic violence too, but on average a woman will suffer 34 incidents of abuse or violence before she actually takes some action about it. So some of the other things we're doing, for example, in relation to the pilots on Clare's Law, so people can have access to information about a partner where they're concerned, the domestic violence protection notices and domestic violence protection orders that have been piloted, trying to put the victim first so that the victim can stay in their home rather than feeling if they report something they're going to be made to leave the home. It's all part of a picture of trying to encourage people to come forward and feel they're going to get the support that they need in relation to those issues. Now, on the final point you made about, is this a sort of, there's a kind of vicious cycle here, and at what point do you want to enter that in order to deal with it? And I think one of the things I would make is when I talk about reducing crime, and I've had this debate over the years, when officers say to me, well, actually, our first duty is to protect the public, our first duty is to protect the vulnerable. And I say, well, actually, my definition of reducing crime isn't just about reducing police-recorded crime. It's actually about taking action that overall impacts on the reduction of crime. So I would argue that ensuring that people who have mental health problems are dealt with properly through health authorities potentially reduces victims, potentially reduces crime. Dealing with antisocial behaviour potentially stops somebody from getting on a cycle of crime. There are a whole variety of things that the police do that I suspect some of you wouldn't automatically think of as reducing crime, but I do. So I see a wider picture in this particular issue. And you're right, we want to get after the criminals who are doing these crimes, and we need to know where the crimes are if we're going to be able to find the criminals.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to move on because I've got several people waiting. Stand up if you would, sir. Tell us who you are and what your question is.
Home Secretary Steve Swanee from Devon and Cornwall Constabulary. From your perspective, what is the problem with police leadership, our leadership, that direct entry is seeking to solve?
Well, direct entry is intended to do a number of things. First of all, I just think it is good to give the opportunity to bring in a wider variety of experience. I think that actually in any area, I think that can enhance the ability of an organisation, an institution, a profession to actually deal with the issues that it is addressing. So I think it's good anyway, in any case. That's not a problem solving, here is a benefit that I think comes from being able to bring in outside expertise. There is a possibility, of course, that direct entry can be used to deal with the issue of diversity in policing, and we know that there is a question about people at senior ranks and indeed throughout policing in relation to diversity. But I think for me, it's about opening up and getting a different range, a different diversity of experience coming in, and I think that enhances the ability of the police to do their job rather than the opposite.
Let me ask you, sir, why are you so opposed to that? I mean, don't you stand the possibility, or face the possibility anyway, of being a little bit Luddite about this? I mean, what is wrong with some fresh minds, some fresh eyes on the subject?
I'm not necessarily opposed to direct entry. I look forward to being able to return to my career in the Royal Marines as a Lieutenant Colonel, perhaps.
I'll speak to Philip Hammond about it.
But I do think that we are exposed and are able to take into our organisations now a wide variety of experience and skills in terms of the police staff that we employ, and in terms of making sure that the non-operational parts of our business are delivered by people with relevant experience and skills. So it is very much the operational leadership of the service that I'm concerned about, and I have concerns that direct entry is not appropriate for the delivery of that operational leadership.
Okay, can I leave it there? I'm going to move on if you don't mind, Home Secretary. I think we've covered the ground there. Gentleman here, stand up here, so tell us who you are.
Home Secretary, good afternoon. Sean Wilson, Metropolitan Police. We heard yesterday from Yvette Cooper, albeit she's the shadow, that she saw both BCU commanders being more co-terminosity with local authorities. We heard also yesterday from Tom Windsor, who talked about the PCCs being accountable only to the electorate and the law. And today, yourself talking about increasing transparency, being critical to reform, and giving us far more independence in terms of undertaking our roles as crime fighters. My concern is, what will you be doing to ensure in 21st century policing that police officers are able to operate with political independence and thereby enabling them to discharge their duties without fear or favour? Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Well, we were absolutely clear when we took the legislation through in relation to police and crime commissioners that operational independence of the police was sacrosanct, that must stay. And that's absolutely, I mean, that underpins the confidence that public have in policing, is that concept of operational independence. And I hope that you would see that some of the decisions or some of the ways that I've operated as Home Secretary have tried to reinforce that. A number of things incidents have taken place where I've been very clear that it is not for me to try to get involved and tell people what to do, that police officers make decisions themselves about how to conduct operations. I find myself using the operational independence phrase quite a lot when people challenge me sometimes, mainly from the media, as to why aren't you doing something about X? And I say, well, this was an operational decision of the police. It was up to them to decide who to arrest, who to investigate. That's not for politicians to say.
Do you not see his point? I mean, most of these people are political animals, aren't they? I mean, they're past politicians, a lot of them. Isn't there going to be always the worry that there is some political influence being brought to bear in their decision-making process?
Well, people said this to me in the run-up to the PCC elections. People said to me, isn't it wrong to politicise the police? And I said, well, first of all, we're not politicising the police, but secondly, don't think that politicians haven't had a role to play in policy terms. The police authorities were predominantly made up of politicians, because they were made up of local councillors predominantly. The Home Secretary, I have to tell you, it may be news to you, but is a politician. You know, it is not the case that politicians have never had any interaction with the police. What is necessary is that politicians understand what the boundary is.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there because we're going to pursue that later on today with a big session. Lady here, tell us who you are and what your question is.
Rachel Farrell from Hampshire. A question for the Home Secretary. We've spoken about direct entry, but I happen to believe that there is a lot of leaders in the middle service ranks who have a lot of potential, really show strong integrity in their leadership, and are perhaps the no-nonsense crime fighters and innovators that you're looking for. I'm just concerned that as much effort hasn't been put into recognising those people and finding ways that those people can be developed and brought forward that might also address issues around diversity. And it's a shame there isn't a scheme outside of what happens with talent management in individual forces, which is a bit hit and miss, that's perhaps on a more national level to recognise those people.
Just to clarify your position, are you suggesting that if we get direct, well, we are going to get direct entry, when we get direct entry, those people will not have the sort of promotion ladder available to them they might have had otherwise?
Well, I think the impact on opportunities for people within the service that show strong talent and are going to bring something different are reduced because of the structure that we've got, the hierarchical structure, the way you have to go through each rank, the lack of opportunities to go out and get experience elsewhere from other business or working in other public sectors. And actually, people coming in direct entry will have an opportunity to bring that in, and actually we don't have an opportunity to develop and grow ourselves from the inside.
Okay, Home Secretary.
And I think there's a very interesting new point you make there about opportunities for people within the force to be able to get some external experience and bring that back into. I think that's something that we can look at. And I think we also need to look, as I think the College of Policing will do, at the strategic command course, at what is it that we are currently expecting of people who are being promoted into very senior ranks. What is it that we are looking for, and are we looking for the right things? And is there a sense that actually you get on by being of a certain, fitting into a certain model? Whereas what people should be looking for is not whether you fit into the model, but whether you've actually got the skills, and perhaps some different skills, that will bring a different way of thinking. So I think there are some challenges. You rightly challenge in terms of looking at how the progression works through policing at the moment, and whether it is too rigidly stuck into one particular structure, and there's more we could do there.
Gentleman here, yes sir. Tell us who you are.
Thank you. Matthew Nichols, Hertfordshire Constabulary. A question for the Home Secretary. You talked about evidence base in your presentation around mental health. So I just want to talk a little bit about evidence base and get a sense from you around police structures. We now have Police Scotland, and we're soon to have the John Stevens review on policing. So I just wondered what you were going to do and how you were going to do it in relation to assessing those two models, or the model that we already have and the evidence base from the Independent Commission. And then, separately, does it worry you that we actually have two separate structures of policing within the UK?
Okay, Home Secretary.
In relation to Police Scotland, obviously, yes, they've come together under one chief, but everything I hear is that actually in many ways they haven't come together as one force in IT and various issues like that as well. So I think it's interesting to watch what happens to them in relation to that. The John Stevens Commission, of course, was commissioned by the Labour Party, and he will be reporting to the Labour Party. We will be interested to see what it is he says. But on this issue that you're alluding to about structures, and Irene mentioned it in her speech about potential bringing forces together, I've taken a very simple view, and this is very much something for local level. If there are forces who wish to merge, who have a business case for merging, and who have public, local community support for doing so, then we've always said that we would look at that. But I think that those caveats are important. And I also think that there is an ability to get a lot of the advantages in terms of collaboration and greater collaborative working, while retaining the identity that is very often important to people, particularly obviously at county level. As it happens, the force that my constituency is in, Thames Valley, of course, has a different identity, but for many forces, it's either obviously a metropolitan one or a county identity. But you can get a lot of efficiencies and a lot of synergies through the collaboration. And I was concerned, obviously, the recent HMIC report, looking at value for money and how forces were responding to the budget cuts, did identify a concern about perhaps a slowing down of collaboration or a stalling of some collaborative efforts. And I certainly, from my point of view, I would very much want to encourage collaboration. I think we have seen some very good examples of that taking place, both in terms of sort of back office administrative collaboration, but of course also collaboration between some forces in terms of their crime fighting units.
Thank you, Home Secretary. Gentleman here, yes sir, tell us who you are.
Andy Prophet, Essex Police. Home Secretary, you've covered part of my question in your answer there. Isn't there a need for a stronger national position, though, on whether 43 forces is fit in the medium to long term, thinking about the financial challenges and public expectation challenges that we face as a force? And is there a danger with 43 police and crime commissioners that we'll start to develop a tapestry of solutions, some internal facing, some with other strategic partners within county areas, some cross-force, that don't really meet the strategic policing requirement and don't really meet the national need?
Well, the strategic policing requirement obviously is there for a purpose, and that is to make clear to police and crime commissioners and chief constables in relation to what is expected from individual forces in contribution to those issues that need to be addressed at a national level, or for which there needs to be a national capability. But on this issue of the 43 forces, I mean, my own view is that I think there is more to do in relation to collaboration amongst forces and working together in a whole variety of ways. I mean, let's look at for example, the IT. I mentioned IT in my speech. 43 forces and 2,000 different IT systems? I mean, there's one company, I'm told, that has 1,500 separate contracts, IT contracts with police forces. I mean, don't tell me there isn't quite a lot that can be done there to actually drive some efficiencies out of the system and actually probably improve the IT offer that is available and the efficiency of usage as well as in terms of the budgets too. So I don't think that we should just be saying, actually, isn't it time to go for those forced mergers? As I say, I think what matters to the public is having that degree of local identity, and you can achieve the local identity with efficiency through the collaboration.
Thank you, Home Secretary. I'm going to come to a gentleman in a minute, but first of all, go to a lady, because we've not had too many of them. It's Nora, isn't it? Tell us who you are, Nora.
I'm Nora Holford from Thames Valley, your local force. And it's in fact in that local context that I wanted to talk to you. We've talked about 43 forces and the efficiencies and the collaboration that can be done. You look at Berkshire, your county, 6 unitary authorities, some of which are very small. And the ability for us in the policing terms to bring efficient services is a real challenge compared to Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire, for example. If I look, my own area is protecting vulnerable people. In domestic abuse terms, Oxfordshire, we've got some really resilient services. In Berkshire, we are really struggling. It's very fragmented. It's very difficult to get funding. The commissioning is often doesn't work, and we don't get the funding through. You've got any sort of context of what the government can do to assist us to try and bring those sort of authorities, still keeping the localism, but ensuring that we have some sort of synergy, and we get the efficiencies out in a way that we can actually drive through safety for the public?
Well, I'm tempted to say you might try by writing to us local MPs and we can have a word with the local authorities. I mean, I'm a supporter of the unitary authorities in Berkshire because I think it has brought decision-making closer to people. But there are some areas where they have seen that it's important for them actually to come together and to perhaps have a lead authority that is operating in certain provision of certain services. And maybe we need to look at that in relation to some of the domestic violence issues that you've raised and you've addressed. So with my other hat on, perhaps if you or somebody in Thames Valley would like to write to me with some of these issues, or we can meet up and talk about it, then perhaps we can take something forward with the local authorities.
Thank you, Home Secretary. Gentleman here, tell us who you are, sir.
Good afternoon, my name's Chris Borlane from the Met, and I have the mental health lead for the Met. And it's a couple of points really. Firstly, it's a bit of a thank you actually. Thank you for your support in encouraging health colleagues to work with us more closely. Just to report back that it is tangibly being felt in London. We are making progress. A long way to go, but really good news, I think. However, my question is about those with mental health who are involved in crime. And we know that there's a disproportionate number of people with mental health issues do come through our custody suites, do end up in prison. And we have got some schemes, such as liaison or diversion schemes, that seek to address that and take these people out of the criminal justice system. But that service is patchy and under-resourced. Now, I know our health colleagues are looking at building an evidence case to take to Treasury. I just wondered what your views were, if the evidence is there, on supporting such schemes in the future, using resources from other parts of government to support policing and reducing crime.
Well, I'm always in favour of using resources from other parts of government to support policing. I mean, I think my answer to you is that there is obviously a lot more in terms of the picture in dealing with people with mental illness, with mental health problems, than the bit that we've started to work on at the moment. So I recognise that there is more to be done across this area, and obviously there's, as Irene mentioned, there's the question of looking at the definitions within the law and whether there is any necessity to change in relation to that as well. So certainly I'd be interested in looking at the evidence base that comes forward in relation to this, and then talking to the health department and, if necessary, others about how we deal with this, because that may obviously impact on the Ministry of Justice as well as the Department of Health. And then there are some other health issues too. I know that the Met often tell me about the number of times when police cars are used effectively as ambulances, not just for mentally ill people, but for others as well. And I think there are some issues there. And of course, we are looking at bringing blue light services together. And this is something the Northamptonshire PCC is looking at, but at the Home Office, we are actively looking at what synergies we can get with between bringing particularly perhaps fire and police more together.
Going to go to the gentleman over there in just a second. Just a couple of points from Irene's speech, if I could, Home Secretary. One, compulsory redundancy. Is it really necessary, is the question that she was asking. And secondly, neighbourhood watch schemes. Are they going to be a sort of nice-to-have facilities, she described it, or will they remain a bedrock of the sort of police picture, because she's concerned that they won't?
Well, on neighbourhood policing, obviously, I mean, I've been in support of neighbourhood policing as well. And I think that is, I mean, it is a decision for chiefs as to how they want to use the resources. And some are dealing with their changes to frontline policing in different ways. And obviously there has been some changes in relation to neighbourhood policing and response teams, working those together. But there are different solutions being adopted out there by chiefs, which are working in different ways. I mean, keeping that local element, that knowledge and understanding and information at local level, obviously, is an important part of the process of dealing with crime. I'm sorry,
compulsory redundancy.
Compulsory redundancy. Well, I'm not going to. I mean, this obviously was proposed in Tom Windsor's report. It's something that the government has asked the police negotiating machinery to look at. This has been through one cycle. The PAT said that I forget the exact phrase they used, but basically they said they thought this was something that should be looked at. It went back to the PMB, and it's now due to go back to PAT. And as I have to take a decision on what the PAT say, I think it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say now one way or the other. I should wait to see what PAT come up with.
OK. Final question from my friend here. Yes, sir. Tell us who you are.
Hello, Home Secretary Howard Vegas from Derbyshire Police. It's just a question on finance, really, and linking. We've had a number of commentators already mentioned around the provision of IT, and you've mentioned it yourself from Scotland and a number of others. Having led on a project to deliver the same IT system within the 5 East Midlands regional forces that acquire telecommunications data, a very successful project. The whole thing behind it was funded by the Home Office, and it was a £500,000 contract, and it does allow the 5 forces in East Midlands to acquire information from across any of the forces. Question is really around what you alluded to about mobile data terminals as well as other IT infrastructures and the use of, for example, you mentioned the iPhone 5 being able to access PNC. I've also had experience of mobile data terminals in my own force, and there are very varied devices out there. The issue that I'm coming to is really around funding for these individual IT equipment, and there's a lot of expense and back office stuff that needs support, and I'm not quite sure forces will have the finance there, and I just wonder where the will was in terms of support from the government.
Home Secretary?
Yes, I mean, obviously there's a number of issues to be addressed on this matter, but in terms of the funding, there is going to be this innovation fund that we'll be setting up from next year, which forces will be able to bid into for particular projects, and I would see that as being one source for forces in relation to innovation. The IT company. One of the aims of the IT company is that in being able to enabling forces to by coming together through the IT company as a single purchaser, there will be economies of scale that it will be possible to gain. So we want to see some greater efficiencies and reducing costs in that sense. But so providing some funding, reducing costs in that way, and then the wider issues about the sort of devices that can be used, the sort of security that will be available. I mean, obviously that's something the Home Office is working on with others in relation to this. But I think that those forces that I've visited where I've seen some form of, I mean, be it Hampshire's Tough Books or what I've seen in Essex and other places as well, just that ability to be able to operate out there rather than constantly having to come back, the ability to access the information when you need it, to have it in advance and of going to somewhere and all those sorts of things just hugely increase efficiency. And I think that's why it's important that we do find ways of being able to move forward on this.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for your questions, and I'm sure you'd like to thank both your President and the Home Secretary for their contribution too.